Something happens every time a baby's born, and no one dares say it out loud. Everyone cheers, cries, films it, posts it. But if you could see what Cioran saw, you wouldn't be clapping. You'd be apologizing, because what looks like a miracle is actually a crime disguised as love. You think you birthed a life? No. You took away the only real piece of being ever had, non-existence. Emil Cioran called it the greatest moral delusion in human history, and the proof is right there in your arms, screaming, helpless, already dying. You didn't create joy, you created a countdown, and the clock starts the second they breathe. Every heartbeat is a step toward the coffin. If you still feel proud of your kids, good. Hold that pride, and it'll turn to guilt soon enough. Because Cioran wasn't anti-life, he was pro-truth. And the truth is this: the most celebrated act on earth is also the cruelest. You'd never force a stranger to sign a contract blindfolded. You'd never push someone into a burning building and call it kindness. But that's exactly what every parent does. They just call it birth. Society builds rituals to hide the brutality: baby showers, gender reveals, miracle of life. All smoke to cover the simple fact: nobody asked for this. Think about it. Every ethical system we have, religion, law, morality, it starts with one principle: consent. You can't touch someone without it. You can't take from them without it. You can't even send them an email without their permission. But you can drag a human being out of non-existence and into inevitable suffering. And people call that beautiful. They think it's ethics. No, that's arrogance wearing perfume. And Cioran saw through the perfume. Not to be born, he said, is undoubtedly the best plan of all. He didn't mean that metaphorically. He meant literally. The kindest act imaginable is refusal. Because birth, according to Cioran, is the end of peace. You're sentencing them to experience hunger, loss, humiliation, and death in slow motion. Yes, you may love your child, but love built on force is no love. It's ownership. You call it a gift. But what kind of gift comes wrapped in mortality? Let that sink in. Every cry you comfort, every sickness you treat, every fear you soothe, you caused all of it. You are both the creator and the curse. Parents hate this idea. Of course they do. It dismantles the myth that keeps them sane. Because if they admit their children didn't consent, they have to face the fact that they're the villains in their own story. You think you made a choice out of love. Cioran says you made it out of fear. Fear of being forgotten, fear of dying alone, fear of meaninglessness. So you manufactured a hostage and called it purpose. But the child will grow up and see it differently. One day, maybe in anger, maybe in heartbreak, they'll say the words every parent secretly fears: I didn't ask to be born. And they'll be right. Brutally, philosophically, undeniably right. Because in the courtroom of existence, no consent means no morality. And every nursery is a crime scene, decorated with balloons. Every parent says the same lie. I just want my child to have a better life than I did. But what if the only thing you can really pass down is pain? Emil saw it clearly and said that birth is no creation, but rather a continuation. A continuation, a relay race of misery, each generation handing the baton of suffering to the next with a smile. You call it legacy. Emil calls it infection. Because you don't give them a clean slate. You give them your anxiety, your trauma, your broken genes, your unhealed wounds, all written into their biology before they even open their eyes. They inherit your fears in silence, your self-doubt in posture, your regrets in DNA. And still you convince yourself you'll do better, but you can't out-parent reality. You can only decorate it. Look closer. Every nursery hides an inheritance lawyer called existence, and existence always collects. That's the cruel genius of life. It promises new beginnings, but delivers recycled endings. Your child will fight the same demons you never conquered. They'll love people who hurt them. They'll age, ache, and eventually stare at a mirror whispering, "I didn't ask for this either." That's the moment the chain completes itself. One victim turns into another creator, and suffering reproduces. You know what it's called? Emil called it the fortune of fools. That temporary joy when the baby arrives, before the realization sets in. Parents celebrate beginnings because they can't face endings. But every birth certificate is just an early draft of a death certificate. You filled in the name. Time fills in the rest. But that's not even the cruel part. Because the moment you try to love what you've created, the sentence begins. There's a prison more elegant than any cell. It smells like baby powder and responsibility. The bars, love. The warden, guilt. The day you have a child, your freedom signs its own surrender papers. 18 years minimum, life sentence likely. Your time stops belonging to you. Your thoughts, your money, your body, all redirected toward the being you created. You didn't expand your life. You outsourced it. And yet society calls that maturity. Emil called it blindness. Because what looks like devotion is often disguised as desperation, the hope that servitude will feel like purpose. You tell yourself it's worth it. That's what every prisoner says when they start decorating their cell. You think you chose responsibility, but responsibility chose you, and it doesn't negotiate. It eats you quietly, one obligation at a time. Watch any parent long enough and you'll see it. The hollow smiles, the aging eyes, the body running on caffeine and obligation. They're just maintaining, not living. You used to chase dreams. Now you chase sleep. You used to love silence. Now it scares you. You used to want adventure. Now you call it instability. Emil warned, the tragedy isn't that parents suffer. It's that they call it happiness. Because once you've invested everything into your own captivity, freedom starts to look like betrayal. But deep down you know, every "I'm fine" hides a scream. Every "worth it" hides a question. Every sacrifice hides resentment. And when the child grows up and leaves, what's left? A person who spent decades existing for someone else, suddenly expected to remember who they were. Most never do. That's why Emil called reproduction the blindness of creation. Because parents can't see the trade until the transaction is complete. Parents love to say children give life meaning, but in reality they don't. They need to believe it's sacred, because without that illusion, they'd have to face the truth. They created a life they can't justify. Meaning isn't found in parenting, it's fabricated to survive it. Cioran said it plainly, legacy is dust. Your great-grandchildren won't remember your name. You tell yourself you're continuing the bloodline, building something eternal. But bloodlines end, names fade, monuments crumble. Your legacy is just decomposition with better marketing. Here's the reality. Meaning doesn't come from creating life. It comes from not needing to. Every species reproduces. Every insect, every virus. So what makes you noble? Emil said the most dangerous addiction isn't alcohol or power, it's significance. Humans will destroy themselves rather than face insignificance. And parenting is the purest form of that addiction. You want to feel infinite, so you outsource your existence into someone else's suffering. You think you created love. You created dependency. You think you built a family. You built a distraction from your own emptiness. And deep down, you know it. That's why parents panic when their kids grow up. Their illusion leaves home too. The child was never their meaning. The child was their mask. Emil saw it and wrote, "Man seeks meaning the way a drunk seeks a wall, to lean on, not to see through." Your purpose was never eternal. It was temporary anesthesia. That's why when the noise fades, the truth finally whispers, You didn't raise a child to love life. You raised them to validate your fear of death. And the universe doesn't care. It never did. That's the punchline to every lullaby. People say instincts never lie. Emil disagreed. He believed instincts are just errors that survived long enough to reproduce themselves. You feel an urge to have children. That urge isn't sacred. It's just your DNA wants copies, not happiness. Biology doesn't care about ethics. It only cares about replication. You think your desire to be a parent is yours. It isn't. It's evolution whispering through you, pretending to be love. You can't hear it because it speaks in hormones, not words. It tells you you'll feel complete. It doesn't tell you that completion is just chemical trickery, dopamine dressed as destiny. Every parent thinks they're acting from choice, but if it were choice, there'd be no guilt in refusing. Yet when someone says, "I don't want kids," the world flinches, not because it's immoral, but because it threatens the hive code. Biology is the quiet dictator of civilization. It commands and you obey. You think you're free? You're just a vessel for genetic ambition. If you're still here, you already know this is no theory, but rather it's recognition. You felt the whisper of biology yourself, that pull you can't explain, that lie you've started to question. That's why people who don't reproduce are called selfish, because they broke the spell. They stopped serving the system. They refuse to be fuel. Cioran puts it like this: everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. And what you really are is an organism pretending to have a soul. Parents will hate this truth. They'll call it cynical, nihilistic, ungrateful. But the truth doesn't care what it's called. It keeps existing quietly behind every diaper commercial and family photo. Because here's the dirty secret of evolution. It doesn't need you happy, it just needs you compliant. So you obey your hormones, call it love, and chain yourself to a purpose you never chose. Then when the chemicals fade, you call it sacrifice. But it's not sacrifice, it's instinct. And the worst part, you'll still defend it. You'll still say it was worth it. Because once you've built your identity around programming, questioning it feels like suicide. Emil never hates biology. He just refused to worship it. He saw that the strongest rebellion isn't violence, but rather refusal. Refusal to reproduce. Refusal to obey. Refusal to continue a system that feeds on suffering and calls it love. Because the only thing more tragic than being born is making sure someone else is. Parenthood begins as a crowd and ends as a cell. Everyone applauds when you start the journey, but no one visits when you realize what you've lost. You enter thinking you're gaining connection. What you actually gain is obligation. Obligation breeds exhaustion, and exhaustion breeds distance. Emil called it companionship through chains. You used to have friends. Now you have witnesses. People who nod politely as you perform fulfillment. They see your posts, your smiles, your filtered joy, and mistake survival for serenity. But behind closed doors, the noise fades and silence returns, loud enough to expose the truth. You're alone, not physically, existentially, because nobody can share a regret they refuse to admit. Parents bond with other parents, not out of love, but out of camouflage. Shared fatigue masquerades as community. They gather like prisoners, swapping escape fantasies. The conversation always ends the same way. But we wouldn't change a thing? Of course not. Denial is the only thing holding the walls up. Cioran wrote that suffering makes accomplices, not allies. You don't connect over joy, you conspire over endurance. Every milestone your child reaches reminds you of time leaving you. Their birthdays feel like countdowns. Their freedom becomes your emptiness. You build a future that doesn't include you, and that's called success. You're proud on the outside, hollow on the inside. You smile at graduations while mourning the version of yourself that never got to live. You pretend this was all worth it because admitting otherwise would collapse your entire identity. And that's how the cycle hides itself, behind the applause of survival. Every "I'm so proud" hides a quiet, "What have I done?" Emil didn't hate parents. He pitied them because they committed the one act you can't undo and then spent a lifetime trying to forgive themselves for it. By now, Emil's philosophy has stripped everything: ethics, purpose, legacy, love. What's left is the only thing no one ever talks about: mercy as rebellion. Emil was daring you to evolve beyond instinct and to stop being enslaved by life. You've spent the entire script watching existence bleed through morality. Now Emil offers a way out, and it's not through death, but through refusal. Because refusal is the quietest form of power. You can't stop the world from creating pain, but you can stop participating in it. You can end the chain without noise, without blood, without legacy. That's what mercy really means in Emil's world. Not forgiveness, not softness, but freedom. The fool thinks rebellion means breaking rules. The wise know rebellion means ending the game. Every civilization worships the creator. Emil worshiped the one who stopped creating. Because when you stop feeding the machine, it starves. When you stop reproducing pain, it dies with you. And that's compassion on a cosmic scale. But people call it nihilism. Everyone fears nothingness. Emil worshipped it, not because it was dark, but because it was clean. People call life a gift. Gifts can be returned, existence can't. That's what makes it monstrous. It traps you in a contract you never sign. Emil wrote, "The wise man refuses to reproduce. The fool perpetuates suffering and calls it love." Non-existence isn't emptiness. It's absence of need. No hunger, no grief, no decay. It's not nothing. It's everything pain can't touch. The living think peace requires heaven. Cioran knew it only requires refusal. We glorify life because we're addicted to movement. We mistake motion for meaning, breathing for purpose, repetition for growth. But what if stopping is the highest evolution? What if extinction is enlightenment done perfectly? People call that morbid. But what's more morbid? To end suffering, or to manufacture it endlessly and call it family. You need to understand that humanity doesn't fear death. It fears running out of excuses for being alive. That's why parents panic when you question reproduction. It's not your argument they hate, it's the mirror. Because deep down, every mother, every father knows there's truth in the silence they try to fill with laughter. Emil believed that peace isn't achieved after life. It exists without it. To never begin is to never lose. To never exist is to never suffer. Emil didn't want to destroy hope. He wanted to free it. Hope without existence is pure, uncorrupted by deadlines, bills, heartbreak, and guilt. Non-existence is the only paradise without witnesses. And here's the paradox. Once you understand this, you stop fearing life too, because you finally see it for what it is: a brief, chaotic spark flickering against an infinite calm. And suddenly the calm doesn't look like death. It looks like mercy. So when you look at a newborn and whisper, "Welcome to the world," Emil would whisper back, "I'm sorry you're here." Because non-existence doesn't punish or forgive. It simply doesn't need to. The fool breeds to escape meaninglessness. The wise refuse and find meaning in refusal itself. And when you finally understand that, you don't rage against life anymore. You simply stop clapping for it, because silence is the only applause existence truly deserves. Emil said it 70 years ago. The world laughed, then kept breeding. And look around now, nothing has changed. More noise, more children, more proof he was right. You've watched this far, which means something inside you already knows. You felt it. that quiet pulse behind the noise, that whisper saying, maybe he's right. Most people will hear this and recoil. They'll call it dark, cynical, dangerous. But what's more dangerous? Refusing to create pain or celebrating it with balloons. You can tell yourself this is too extreme, that life is still beautiful, that meaning still matters. Fine. Keep telling yourself that. Keep passing down the sentence. Because the truth doesn't need believers. It just waits, silent, patient, undefeated. Emil didn't demand followers. He demanded honesty. And honesty hurts more than any doctrine can heal. You don't owe existence anything. You don't owe evolution obedience. You don't owe biology another victim. You owe silence. You owe refusal. You owe mercy to the unconceived. Because someday, another crowd will cheer, another child will cry, and somewhere, another version of you will whisper, I didn't ask for this. That's when you'll remember these words, not as theory, but as prophecy. Don't reproduce. Don't perpetuate. Don't participate in the machinery of suffering, because life keeps screaming for applause. And philosophy doesn't clap back. It just refuses.